Welcome to the Alliance for Integrity's fourth global conference, Achieving Business Integrity Through Collective Action, Successes, Lessons and Challenges. My name's Natasha Walker and it's my great pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. Collective action has been a major factor for success in fighting corruption and strengthening integrity. Stakeholder high-level panel discussion, ensuring that the promotion of transparency and integrity is at the centre of the post-pandemic world. And this will be followed today by the closing ceremony of the Global Integrity Campaign until 4:30 Central European Summer Time. Before we start the panel, let's give you the floor and ask you two questions to understand you a bit better. We're using the polling function of the app that you're in, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, in a tab. There's no need to close the live stream window or leave the platform. So trusting that you have all found that button, let me ask you a first question just to understand which organisation or organisations you're representing here. So there's a multiple choice and feel free to click as many as you feel you're representing. First of all, company, business association, public sector, civil society, international organisation, or academia. So the results should already be put up. And let's have a look and see the range. Oh my goodness, and it really is a range of organisations that we have in the room. Fantastic. So we've got a lot of international organisations, but look how well balanced we are. We could do with a little bit more civil society voices. Our panelists from civil society will have to speak a bit louder. Oh no, we're moving to more parity there. And a lot of business representatives. Fantastic. Thank you. The next question is a question which we'd like to pose to understand your view of the current trends in the way that the world is dealing with business integrity. So what do you say? Do you say at the moment the world is dealing with the whole issue of business integrity by saying the primary goal is to recover from the crisis and build up a strong economy? Integrity has to take a back seat for the moment. Or integrity is important but shouldn't put economic recovery in any more danger. Or integrity is one building block for a sustainable future. Or the pandemic has shown that true recovery will depend on how well we actively work to strengthen integrity. So this is not necessarily your view, but it's your view of the current trend in the way the world is dealing with business integrity. So press now, please. Oh, again, a mixed picture. On top, one building block for a sustainable future, which means that a lot of you are saying we have understood that at least integrity is part of our way forward. And no one's saying it shouldn't put economic recovery in any more danger. But we do have some voices saying the primary goal is to recover. But almost a third of you equate how well we actively work to strengthen integrity with how well we truly recover. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And that's going to be useful information also for our panel later. So let's now invite Parliamentary State Secretary Norbert Bartler to welcome us here at the conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Secretary, on behalf of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, I would like to welcome you to the fourth Global Conference of the Alliance for Integrity. The world's developing and emerging economies are losing 1.26 trillion US a year through corruption, bribery, and tax evasion. This is more than 8 times the volume of global official development assistance, which is 150 billion US dollars. Corruption makes services and goods more expensive, and it discourages investment. It fuels divisions and inequality in society. It undermines confidence in institutions and distorts free competition. Corruption prevents the sustainable development of economies and societies. It is only good for few individuals and bad for everyone else. That is why more than 6 years ago, we launched the Alliance for Integrity together with the Global Compact Network Germany and the Federation of German Industries. Our goal is to fight corruption and foster integrity and the rule of law. For example, by developing corruption prevention strategies together with all stakeholders, by carrying out practice-oriented training programs, and by providing advice on the introduction of compliance systems, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises in developing and emerging economies, where there is a lack of resources. More than 260 trainers are currently active in the Alliance, and it brings together hundreds of organizations from all social sectors from 14 partner countries. This is a successful story for which I sincerely thank all the members. Without the involvement of the private sector, the SDGs cannot be reached. In the current pandemic, the work of the Alliance is more important than ever before. Players have been forced to reinvent business models, operation processes, and procedures. In some instances, huge amounts of money were mobilized extremely quickly in order to buy masks and drugs and reduce the impact of the pandemic. This has massively increased the risk of corruption. Many of you know such cases, and I'm too. In order to prevent corruption, we need collective action. Policymakers, the private sector, and civil society, they all need to fight corruption. So I want to invite all participants to use the coming days to play an active part, share their ideas, and build networks. Let us jointly create a fair and corruption-free future that benefits all. I look forward to your ideas and contributions.
And I think it's really clear that the case is there to act and to act now collectively. It's a great pleasure for Susanne Friedrich to be here as the director of the Alliance for Integrity, and everyone she's seen who's coming on in this really great alliance has been waving to her and saying, great to see you, Susanne. So please give us your welcome speech.
Thank you, Natasha. Dear participants and supporters, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome on behalf of the Alliance for Integrity. It's really great and a great pleasure to have you with us here at our 4th conference of the in 2021. So what can you expect from the next hours and days? Well, strengthening integrity both in the public and in the private sectors has been high on the global agenda in the recent years. And support for integrity and transparency by business leaders has increased. And many companies have put in place compliance programs that tighter regulatory frameworks and also changing expectations. Developments during the COVID-19 pandemics, however, have shown that there's still much to do. And in times of crisis, many actors, both in the private and in the public sector, are overwhelmed by the disrupted supply chains and by the need for emergency response. And this greatly increases the risks of corruption and the loss of gains, for example, in the fight against poverty. So collective action, the approach brings together all relevant actors and provides a forum for dialogue, for sharing best practices, and space to work together on innovative solutions to strengthen integrity in business. The Alliance for Integrity is a place where you can meet a huge variety of actors, all motivated to do better in terms of compliance and integrity, and ready to play an active role in taking this topic forward. So if you need to know how other companies deal with the challenge of cybersecurity, for example, you want to tap into a new market and need to know how to deal with service providers, or you want to empower women in your organization to actively promote integrity and want to learn how, or you are interested in learning how governments promote integrity pacts, be assured that you will find peers and partners who will share your interests at the Alliance for Integrity. So we invite you these days to reflect on how, in the light of experience and lessons learned from the pandemic, collective action can be further leveraged, what innovative ways of working together have proven to be successful, where there's potential for upscaling and replication, and how the specific challenges of different actors can be taken into account. So, dear participants, in the upcoming days, we want to light a firework of good practices from the ground. Our partners have been really busy during the last month and year. We start today with a distinguished group of experts on our first panel, most of them partners who have already come a long way with us, to discuss how collective action can be key to strengthen integrity as a contribution to a fair, transparent, and sustainable business. And today we end with the closing of the biggest collective action activity we had last year, the Integrity Campaign. And then tomorrow we will proudly present, among others, new features of the Integrity app, our virtual assessment tool. We will introduce you to our new Asian trainers platform, our new handbook for export compliance in the textile sector. We want to show best practices, how to empower women entrepreneurs in the fight against corruption. And we will close on Thursday with another prestigious panel and discuss how compliance officers can further develop or even reinvent their role in order to deal with new challenges in a changing world in the light of digitalization, new behavioral insights, and more responsibility, for example, regarding human rights due diligence. And last but not least, we will honor our trainers who are at the heart of the Alliance for Integrity and who, with their enthusiasm and their dedication, make really a substantial and very concrete contribution to leveraging the playing field. Well, I hope you enjoy the next hours and days. I wish you new insights and learnings and look very much forward to welcoming new supporters to our network. So let's walk the talk together. Thank you.
Thanks, Susanna. And it really does seem to be an alliance of dedication, as you've said, but also of transparency, learning, and action. And I think that's so important. It's not just talking about it, it's actually supporting each other to make the change together. And the diversity of organizations that you've just heard really is phenomenal. Here's another voice of one important partner. Beatrix is Secretary of Transparency in Colombia, and she's here to also give her view on the alliance.
Buenas tardes. Quiero extender un agradecimiento por la invitación a participar a la cuarta conferencia global de Alliance for Integrity y saludar a los invitados especiales al foro Alcanzando la Integridad de los Negocios a través de la acción colectiva. Los aliados en Colombia de todos los sectores que como firmantes de los pactos por la integridad y la lucha contra la corrupción han podido comprobar la utilidad de esta importante iniciativa y a todas las personas que se conectan de manera virtual a este importante evento. el gobierno de Colombia, por convicción y compromiso establecido en el Plan Nacional de Desarrollo, cero tolerancia con la corrupción y falta de transparencia, ha venido implementando diferentes estrategias para luchar contra este flagelo. Quiero contarles sobre algunas de las más importantes estrategias que hemos venido implementando junto con el sector privado para llevar la lucha contra la corrupción al siguiente nivel. Para lograr la unión de esfuerzos con el sector privado, desde el 2019, la Vicepresidencia de la República y la Secretaría de Transparencia de la Presidencia de la República hemos firmado pactos por la integridad y lucha contra la corrupción con alrededor de 56 gremios colombianos que agrupan más de 37.000 empresas como parte de su ruta de la integridad empresarial. El más reciente lo firmamos el 17 de marzo de 2021 con la Confederación Colombiana de Cámaras de Comercio. Precisamente con Alliance for Integrity hemos venido realizando un trabajo muy importante con las empresas firmantes de los pactos, muchas de las cuales ya han descargado la aplicación de Integrity App y han venido autoevaluando y mejorando sus mecanismos de cumplimiento y transparencia empresarial. Gracias a esta valiosa colaboración de Alliance for Integrity, se ha implementado la ruta de la integridad empresarial desde la Vicepresidencia de la República y todos los gremios del país. Quiero reiterar el mensaje que hemos transmitido al sector empresarial en Colombia. No es buen negocio descuidar la transparencia. No es rentable a largo plazo optar por los atajos y las ganancias rápidas que arrojan los actos de corrupción. Estamos convencidos que las empresas que realmente son sostenibles a largo plazo, las empresas que crecen y se desarrollan, son aquellas que adoptan un buen gobierno corporativo, las que cumplen con las reglas y se mantienen dentro de la legalidad. Los atajos de corrupción simplemente resultan más costosos a largo plazo, pues la falsa ilusión de éxito, camuflada en los efímeros resultados generados por la corrupción, solo estanca la posibilidad de un crecimiento empresarial real. La corrupción es un problema global que genera consecuencias políticas, económicas y sociales dentro de los países. Puede, por ejemplo, perjudicar el funcionamiento de las instituciones públicas y afectar la democracia, generar menos inversiones, aumentar los niveles de pobreza y desigualdad en la sociedad. En resumen, la corrupción frena y destruye el desarrollo y el progreso de los pueblos. Se estima que hacer inversiones en un país relativamente corrupto puede ser 20% más costoso que hacerlas en un país sin corrupción. Y según el Banco Mundial, los países que combaten la corrupción y afianzan el imperio de la ley aumentan su ingreso nacional hasta en un 400%, lo que trae beneficios directos en la calidad de vida de los ciudadanos, en la generación de valor del sector empresarial. El Estado colombiano sigue en su tarea de consolidar la transparencia, la prevención y luchar contra la corrupción. Y por iniciativa del actual gobierno, del presidente Iván Duque Márquez, se ha presentado al Congreso el proyecto de ley 341, iniciativas con las que vamos a establecer la responsabilidad de las personas jurídicas cuando exista una condena por el delito de corrupción contra alguno de sus administradores, las empresas se hayan beneficiado de esa utilidad de ese delito y además hayan conestado o hayan por acción u omisión no aplicado en debida forma su compliance o su sistema de control del riesgo de prevención. Entre las propuestas de este proyecto de ley también tenemos disposiciones que permiten a las superintendencias y demás entidades que ejercen la vigilancia de los sectores económicos iniciar esos procesos administrativos sancionatorios contra esas empresas que, como lo mencioné, se lucraron del delito de corrupción que hayan cometido uno cualquiera de sus administradores. Esas empresas van a ser sujetos de sanciones una gama de sanciones que van desde una multa por 200.000 salarios mínimos legales mensuales vigentes hasta inhabilidad para contratar e incluso la posibilidad extrema que le cancelen y disuelve la persona jurídica. Estamos implementando las mejores prácticas dentro de los esquemas productivos y las cadenas de valor. Es necesario, entonces, seguir construyendo alianzas intersectoriales, coordinar acciones conjuntas entre el sector público y el sector privado para que esos programas de cumplimiento y para esos programas anticorrupción sean efectivos en una concatenación de trabajo conjunto. Muchas gracias.
And thank you very much. I'm very pleased that we managed to get you, Beatrix, and for also sharing the sense of urgency. And now it really is time to begin the panel discussion, ensuring that the promotion of transparency and integrity is at the centre of the post-pandemic world, as you've just sketched, also particularly at a political level, but at all levels. And I've been joined by João Ricardo Lagazzi Rodrigues, who will be visually recording the discussion as we go. So it's going to be exciting seeing what João makes of our conversation. Looking forward to the post-pandemic era, it's more than timely now to take stock of how integrity has stood up to COVID-19 and how we can strengthen it as we go forward. Now, our discussion will be taking place in 3 panels. The first is on the status quo and immediate learnings. The second, on the conditions for long-term change, building back better. And the third is on collective action moving forward. And the panels will build on each other, and each panel will see 2 of 6 panelists in pole position for initial comments, followed then by all other panelists who will be invited to contribute immediately afterwards. And please, everybody who's joined us, feel free to leave your thoughts in the chat of the app. Susanna will be monitoring them, and we should have some time to address them later on in the discussion. And here are your panelists, themselves reflecting the potential and diversity at the core of collective action. Jorge Bermudez has been Comptroller General of the Republic of Chile for over 5 years. He's currently the Executive Secretary of the Organization of Latin American and Caribbean Supreme Audit Institutions and holds the chair of the Working Group on Gender Equality and Non-Discrimination of that organization and of the United Nations Board of Auditors. Ashish Kumar Chauhan is a technocrat from the Indian Institutes of Technology and Management. He works as the CEO of BSE, the former Bombay Stock Exchange, with a market capitalization of listed companies close to $3 trillion. Ashish is one of the founders of the National Stock Exchange and is considered the father of modern financial derivatives in India due to his work there. Dr. Delia Ferreira Rubio is the chair of Transparency International. She's a member of the steering committee of the Open Government Partnership and of the Partnering Against Corruption initiative of the World Economic Forum. She's co-chair of the WEF Global Future Council on Transparency and Anti-Corruption. Olajobi Makinwa is Chief of Intergovernmental Relations and Africa for the United Nations Global Compact, where she leads high-level interactions between governments, the private sector and civil society in order to strengthen multi-stakeholder cooperation and partnerships for the SDGs and the UN Global Compact 10 principles. Prior to her current role, Jabi served as the Chief of Transparency and Anti-Corruption at the UN Global Compact. Klaus Morsmeier joined Novartis in 2018 as Chief Ethics, Risk and Compliance Officer. He oversees important functions that help Novartis deliver on its strategy to build trust with society. And his impact also reaches beyond Novartis. He leads global integrity, compliance and anti-corruption bodies for business on behalf of the OECD and the G20 and B20. And last but certainly not least, our 6th speaker, also a lawyer, Pablo Zambrano, is president of the Chamber of Industries and Production and president of the National Federation of Chambers of Industries in Ecuador, building on a wealth of experience in leading positions in the private sector. And it's always at these moments where I wish we were in one room together and we could hear the applause, because what an illustrious panel we have here today. So as I say, 2 of you are in pole position for each one of the 3 parts of our discussion, and we will be starting with the status quo, what the pandemic has revealed, with Klaus Morsmeier and Delia Ferreira in pole position. So Klaus, if I could start with you, please. What are the most critical risks from your perspective from Novartis on integrity and compliance in global supply chains?
Thank you, Natasha, and dear fellow panelists, and to Susanne, thank you so much for having me in this panel, and I'm sure we'll have a great discussion. Look, as Susanne said at the beginning, first of all, I would make one statement. It's important to maintain functioning global supply chains and collaboration, because if not, we will not win the fight against the pandemic together. It's also true for the fight against corruption. There's no national state, there is no sector which will win the fight against COVID-19 alone. Again, that's the same true as for the fight against corruption. So we need functioning global supply chain. And coming from a pharmaceutical company, I had my concerns, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. All what we are doing in our industry, from research and development, manufacturing, and access to patient, is based on global collaboration. And when I saw the first sign at the beginning of the pandemic of states saying, we deal with it alone, we have our own national strategy, I thought this will not be helpful. And now I believe we have seen that collaboration pays out. We help each other globally. And this is also a good framework going forward for the future. Now about the compliance regime, Natasha and your colleagues. I understand the urgency of the support. And that's true for governmental support. It's also true for the business. But it can't be, and I've unfortunately seen this in some countries, to the detriment of human rights. We have seen local legislation lowering human rights standards to get the economy back on track. But this can't be the solution. This would hit hardest to the most vulnerable part of society again. And the business needs to be vocal and maybe also more vocal to avoid this. Also on emergency care and support, we need this, and we need it fast, but also we need this in a controlled way. And it's true for the states and it's true for the business. So we need to maintain good due diligence to avoid fraud and corruption. Again, we need speed, but also control. So closing, we need to maintain global supply chains. We need to maintain global collaboration to fight the pandemic and corruption. And we need to focus still on human rights and good due diligence to avoid that the poorest and most vulnerable part of society is suffering. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, Klaus, you've talked about the most vulnerable, and I think that they've become very visible, but perhaps still even more vulnerable due to the crisis. Delia, if I could ask you, with the viewpoint of Transparency International, who are the most affected stakeholder groups? Is it the most vulnerable? And what's an example of some of the negative impacts on integrity? You're muted, Delia.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, gotcha.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the invitation, Susanna and Natasha and colleagues. A pleasure to join you in this conversation. And of course, talking about the status quo, what we find at the very beginning of the pandemic was the increased risk in corruption that this crisis will bring to the world. And we have confirmed that. The corruption has been increasing in the response against the pandemic. And we cannot fight against corruption alone. It is, as Klaus says, a collective endeavor, and we have to fight together. Of course, the most vulnerable has been the most affected. Women has been affected because of the change of home working and the care responsibilities in society. Children has been affected with schools closed, and inequality has enhanced the divide in societies because many children has no access to virtual lessons or computer or e-learning in the same position as other children. It is happening even in developed countries. But what we have seen is a great correlation between countries with high levels of corruption and weak responses in terms of healthcare, health system, and also the support in terms of the economic crisis that these societies are facing. Another correlation very clear is that countries with high levels of corruption has been those reacting or passing emergency measures that are really affecting democratic institutions and human rights. So the most undemocratic responses are correlated with high levels of corruption. Apart from people, I would say that the victims of the pandemic has been, in terms of integrity and corruption, rule of law in many countries, integrity in the public sector, integrity in public procurement. Information has been one of the victims. Fair competition has been one of the victims. And of course, the accountability systems. In many countries, what we have seen is that not only people were put in quarantine, constitutions were put in quarantine, accountability mechanisms were put in quarantine. So we have to work together to restore integrity, and I was very happy to see the response in the first question you asked the public. Integrity as a building block in this rebuilding forward, not back, rebuilding forward in a better way. We have to do this together. With corruption, we will not rebuild better. That's clear.
And Delia, do you believe that this very positive recognition that the answers to our poll said it's a building block on the way to sustainable development, do you think that's actually been recognized by more governments and more companies through the pandemic?
Of course, it's very difficult to give you one answer for the whole world or the whole companies. Many companies have recognized that and are working in what I call integrity beyond compliance, which is a new integrity culture in companies. Novartis is an example. We are working with Klaus in many other partnerships, and we are working for this. There are governments that are putting attention to transparency and accountability. But to give you just one example, in terms of vaccines, what we have seen all over the world, developed, underdeveloped, South, no, rich, poor countries, is absolute confidentiality and opaqueness on contracts. No information. And of course, we are seeing corruption also in the delivery part of the vaccination campaigns. So some governments have understand the need of integrity and transparency, and some governments are reluctant to do that.
Okay, thank you. And you've said it's really impossible to speak for the whole world, but perhaps, Joby, you could give us a little bit of an idea of the African continent and how some of those responses have been, and whether you see that there is a recognition, as we've heard, for more integrity in building back.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to this event. Indeed, as Delia has said, it's almost the same response all over the world in terms of integrity. And I believe also that while we are here this morning, morning for me in New York, is because there's still no integrity. Integrity is still not something that governments and the private sector and many people have embraced. So it's in terms of the responses also, it has been the same, whether in Africa or all over, it depends. So exactly what Delia has said in terms of responses. And I actually want to emphasize also when we discuss the issue of vaccines, as you can see, the contract itself, they are in secrets, you know. So it's important for us, for government, to actually be open and transparent. And, you know, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Jorge, we were hearing before that there seems to be, you know, a whole question of re-understanding what control looks like in making sure that we handle the pandemic with integrity. Now, I'm just wondering how
This is the institution which I lead here in my country. And regarding your question, I think as a supreme audit institutions, as Contraloría, we always are struggling with the budget. We always are asking for more resources in order to perform our work. We didn't receive anything. We have a fixed budget, and so we have to use these resources wisely. And the only way to use these resources is through the use of IT, through the use of technology. So I think IT plays a key role in order to fight against corruption, in order to face the challenges of the pandemic, of course, and to face the challenges which the citizenship is asking for an institutions like the Contraloría. For instance, last year we could change from the on-site modus to an outside, I mean home office modus, the way we were working and performing our audits. And I think IT was playing a key role in order to move from an on-site institution to an outside institution. But also the use of technology allowed us to use data analytics and artificial intelligence, which is we are very, very proud of that, because we maybe since 2019, we were working with databases. We as institution has the access to databases in the state and also in our own databases. And we can use this information in order to have a more accurate view where the risks are. So for example, last year, we would find that more than 95% of the public procurements of the contracts last year related with the pandemic were direct awarding contracts, which is a high risk. It's a very, very high risk of corruption. So I think, to sum up, I think the use of IT is key in the new normality in order to fight more effectively the corruption.
Okay, thank you. I can see you're nodding, Klaus. Just a few words, also perhaps on the micro, on the organization internal view, the role of IT.
Yeah, I would agree with Jorge. I mean, that's a major step, or if you do it right, for more transparency. I mean, we had the discussion, and all the colleagues know this, since years, if not decades, about beneficial ownership transparency. For example, about transparency in procurement. And now that we are unfortunately forced to go all digital and have our whole business on digital platforms, this should, if we are consistent, enhance transparency. And you know, at the OECD level, on the B20 level, the G20 level, that's a big topic. Now, a little bit on the risk side, maybe. First of all, the artificial intelligence also, and Delia knows this, she's always a big focus on this. There's also a debate about integrity and ethics. Our own biases are often in artificial intelligence. And I look in a pharmaceutical company where we use artificial research and development, clinical trials, we have to be extremely careful to manage this the right way, because it's all about human life and health at the end of the way. Biases, diversity and inclusion topics are extremely important. And then, you know, lastly, for compliance professionals as a public entities, of course, you have higher transparency, but the personal touch in audits, in investigations, in controls, of course, is lacking at the moment. And this is partly compensated by higher insights from the data, but there's a lack of really interpersonal discussions and interviews. And this also has to be figured in.
Joby, and then Delia.
Janine? Thank you, Klaus, for marking or pointing out the risks that we are facing when we use this very useful technology that digitalization is provided. We have to be aware of these risks, because if not, we are in a way outsourcing our decision-making capacity as companies, as governments, or in civil society. And what we have seen in terms of digitalization and the use of artificial intelligence during the pandemic is the problem of surveillance over societies. Human rights should be at the center of any artificial intelligence policy or technology that is adopted by countries or by companies. Just this week, we are discussing at the UNESCO the recommendation on ethics in artificial intelligence, taking human rights and humans as the center, and having in clear that whatever technology we use, whatever artificial intelligence or machine learning tool we use, it is essential to check and have audits that guarantee that there are no biases and we have human oversight, as Klaus was mentioning. This is the discussion nowadays, and some countries have used these apps, tracking apps, not only for the sake of facing the problems of the pandemic or with public health purposes, but also to surveil citizens in a very undemocratic and dangerous world.
And as we've heard before, it's going hand in hand, some surveillance and risks to integrity. Joby and then Jorge.
Thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to add that, with technology also during the COVID-19, we saw a massive increase in cyber attacks and criminal activities. And so it remains to be seen how remote working will impact on transparency and integrity in the workplace in the longer term. So we have to address these challenges of technology also. It has its positive side, but it does have its, negative side also. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jorge.
Thank you. Well, I want to share with you the point of view from the public sector and from the Contraloría, of course. And you have to keep in mind that we have a huge amount of work. For instance, in 2019, we received more than 20,000 compliance from the citizenship. But last year, we received 40,000 compliance from the citizenship. So more than double. So if you want to handle this big amount of work, you have to use technology, because we will not receive more auditors, for instance. So we are using technology, especially for planning our audits and especially for focus our work in a wisely manner. For instance, through the use of the technology, we can find that, for instance, many companies were founded one day before they were awarded by the direct contract. Of course, this is a huge red flag in order to have some insights of or risk of corruption. So we are very aware about the problems of the use of technology, biases, for instance, or maybe some kind of discrimination, or maybe the cybersecurity problems. But I think it's a very helpful tool in order to accomplish our mission as an institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before we close, looking at the status quo, I'd love to hear from Pablo and Ashish on where you see perhaps positive examples of how companies and governments have reacted to mitigate risks during this pandemic period. Ashish, could I start with you? Just one example, perhaps.
I think I am a technocrat, and I think technology will give solutions which our traditional methods cannot. And I appreciate the worries about the biases and also the corruption. But there is no guarantee. And it is proven beyond doubt that our current methods are completely corrupt and they are completely biased. So effectively saying that what is coming in future is going to be biased, at least we have that worry, is also in a way trying to say that we want to continue with the corrupt practices. So we need to maintain that balance between what is current, what is correct, and what is correct, because otherwise we'll continue to resist what is good. For me, the technology gives solutions which the traditional methods don't give. For example, audit. For me, audit is a post facto activities. And many times it happens, or rather most times it happens after several years. And it may not have the correct data, adequate data, appropriate data, and so on and so forth. And just relying on that post facto framework to basically stop corruption or to provide better services is, in my opinion, a very odd way to look at it. While as the modern technology allows you to actually intervene, provide services at the really at the user level, at individual level. And I also understand the worries about the privacy and governance. For example, India today has around 1.4 billion people. If you add up Europe, entire Europe, all countries, including UK, if you add up US, if you add up Canada and few other countries, and India will still have 300 million more people left. It is 18% of world population, and how it is basically trying to manage even the governance. Last year, from April of 2020, December of 2020, India gave free food to 800 million people. 800 million people got free food, and also they got some money in their mobile connected bank account so that they can use it for some needs, because only food may not be needed, something else.
Yeah.
800 million people got free food, which is unheard of. I believe UN Food Program last year got Nobel Peace Prize for giving probably 1/100th of servicing 1/100th of those number of people. I'm telling you, it has been done using automation. Similarly, in terms of just vaccination, to give you a perspective, till now at 5 p.m. that's currently we are around 6:30. 1.5 hours back, the vaccination for today got over in India at 5 p.m. We had 143 million people, 143 million vaccination doses for 134 million people. So around 1.12 110 million people have got 2 doses, and
Right.
around 143 million people have got total doses. Everything is real time. You need to you can book your vaccination appointment anywhere in India, around 65,000 locations. And
so I'm
we are
hearing-
able to do this. And e-governance for me, the way I look at it is the world became developed, or what we call developed countries got developed on the back of hard infrastructure, on ports, on roads, on electricity generation. The new world will be developed on what I call soft infrastructure.
Okay,
E-governance.
thank you.
E-knowledge.
Actually, so I can hear that you really have, as many also on this panel, there's this embracing of technology that we have been forced to also do during the pandemic. And we've seen that it brings transparency, it gives us the opportunities to intervene. It makes the risks perhaps also more transparent, but it's perhaps creating new risks. And I think that's what we need to take forward in saying, so what are we going to build back better? Perhaps just a last, Pablo, have you got a favorite? Have you got something that's really worked, companies reacting well to the pandemic in terms of mitigating the risks of corruption?
I believe that the companies have been really aware of the risks of corruption. So what we have been doing is promoting integrity within industries and within companies. Specifically because, sadly, during the pandemic, we have had some critical issues with the public sector, with corruption acts from the public sector. So the reaction from the companies has been really good in terms of acting properly. And of course, we from the Chamber of Industries and from the Federation of Industries have been promoting this Alliance for Integrity courses in order to promote within small and medium businesses integrity and courses. So the reaction from the private sector, as we have seen, it's been good. And of course, sadly, the pandemic showed and emerged some corruption in the health system, for instance. So what we are really conscious that if during a pandemic, during this emergency, corruption, explodes, something is wrong in the society. So we have to move forward and do things in collaboration with different institutions. It's a key issue, the public and private collaboration in order to fight against corruption.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the discussion so far has shown that we really do need to be thinking much harder about how we control corruption with the speed of IT as we go forward, and also with just listening to Ashish, with the amount of people that we're talking about who have this direct contact to businesses, to potentially being vulnerable. This is where we need to be looking at governance much more strongly. One personal learning during the crisis so far from you on securing integrity. One sentence, please, a short sentence. Jovi, what's your one personal main learning during the crisis so far?
Leadership matters. Leadership, because a leader that does not have integrity cannot talk about integrity, the tone from the top. So leadership matters, and also multilateralism also matters, working together.
Thank you. Ashish, what's your one sentence, your main learning?
Transparency is the best disinfectant, and transparency can be brought by automation at delivery levels, at delivery points.
Thank you. Delia? You're muted.
Essential.
No, you're on.
It's okay. Trust is essential, and it must be rebuilt on truth.
Ooh. Thank you. Jorge?
I think I sum up in 2 words: uncertainty and humility. Uncertainty because we are facing an uncertain future and uncertain world. So we have to adapt and work with creativity to face these challenges. And humility because I think in these times, no one has the right answer for every problem.
Thank you. Pablo?
Collective action is a key issue, and we have to work to strengthen collective action against corruption.
Thank you. We'll be coming to that very specifically. And Klaus?
Yeah, it's about resilience. We need resilience going forward as persons, as human beings, as companies, as societies, as countries, as public organizations. Resilience and purpose. I found there's a huge appetite for purpose during a crisis, and there's where ethics and integrity needs to stay on the forefront.
So maybe, thank you, just listening to you, it seems as if we are learning a lot, and we have learned a lot over the course of the last 13, 14, 15 months, which could really mean that there could be a new agenda for integrity. So let's see what we're going to put on it. Before we do that, just a question for the audience as well. So 2 polls. One is, and it should be live right now, is integrity high enough on the international political agenda on a scale of 1 to 7? Do you think that integrity is high enough on the international political agenda right now as we speak? We have a lot of people from international institutions here, but also from public and private organizations. Well, it's a lot of middle ground there. So most people are saying it's a 3, so not that high, just below. So I think we've got some work to do, which is great, because otherwise we wouldn't need this panel. So we have a lot of work to do to get it up on the political agenda, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. And the second question is, how confident are you that integrity will be prioritized after the crisis? So this is basically saying, I'm confident that we will have a trend seeing integrity being prioritized as we leave the crisis. Oh, look. And the picture is slightly different. There's more confidence there that things will change, but there are also some voices, and this is really important, who say 1. That means we're not confident at all, right? So this is going to be up to us also on our panel to perhaps raise that confidence and think about how we can get it up on the agenda. In pole position for building back and is Joby and Ashish, who you've already met. So Joby, if I could actually ask you exactly the same question that I just asked our audience, how confident are you that integrity will be prioritized more after the crisis? And it's a scale of 1 to 7. So what do you take? 7 is high, I'm confident, and 1 is low, with an explanation of your choice, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Natasha. I think I'll take about 3.5. And yes, indeed, because I believe we haven't learned from history. And that's why government and, almost every one of us were not prepared, with regards to addressing the challenges of COVID-19. But let me actually start, in terms of what we mean by integrity itself. What is it we're talking about integrity? Integrity could be personal integrity, which is a key trait that is required of every one of us, every people, everyone, but especially of leaders. Somebody said that integrity is the hallmark of ethical leadership. So integrity is about doing the right things at the right time. For organizations, it is about building the right mechanisms and cultures to mitigate humankind's worst inclinations. Have we done that? I don't know. Are we going to do it in post-COVID? I don't know. Integrity is about moving beyond compliance. Delia has said it, and beyond ticking the legal boxes, which many companies, many people do. It is about embedding ethics and higher standards as part of an institution's core identity. And this is where the United Nations comes in. The United Nations comes in to set the norms and the standards for a robust response, which is built on multilateralism, where all facets of ideas and cultures coalesce. The UN Convention Against Corruption provides the tools for us to fight corruption in all its forms. Since the coming into force of the convention, what have we done with it? Have we fully implemented the convention itself? And the lack of integrity has worsened the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. All over the world, we see citizens very angry. Civil society and business also stepping up to call for greater accountability by governments and companies alike, having seen we must live with the consequences should corruption prevail. So people are angry. Recovery with integrity has been a key priority of the United Nations during the response to COVID-19. So I am hopeful that integrity will continue to be prioritized after the crisis. I'm hopeful. I'm not really convinced. Why am I hopeful? Well, we have a great opportunity for ambitious reforms and initiatives at the first ever UN General Assembly special session against corruption this June. So I hope this will be a turning point to turn words into action by government and all stakeholders. Government, civil society organizations, businesses, investors, we must all come together to strengthen anti-corruption and integrity so as to improve overall governance. This crisis has shown us that when fighting corruption, corruption fights back, and sometimes it kills. We see a matter, sometimes it's a matter of life and death. Is it integrity when we hear of fake PPEs? Is it integrity when we hear of fake testing kits, fake masks, and now fake vaccines? Is that integrity? These issues show lack of integrity and wickedness. Countries cannot afford to lose precious resources at the best of times, and even less so during and after the pandemic. If ever there was a time for anti-corruption reforms, it is now. Integrity was important before COVID-19 pandemic. It is even more important today. So as we recover from the pandemic, integrity has to continue to be important. Mm-hmm. It will become a major issue to build public confidence. But will action follow rhetorics? For me, that is the big question. And that's why I'm hopeful, but I'm not confident that integrity will be taken on board, by the majority in the society. Mm. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for reminding us of the anger that's out there. And so, Ashish, in asking you a question like how has the crisis affected the way we think of corruption, can you say whether companies feel that anger in the same way that citizens perhaps do, and thus also push the whole question of integrity onto the agenda?
Some ways, what I have observed, even in this discussion and everywhere, is that we use words like integrity, ethics, trust, confidence, truth as synonyms or interchangeable words. And a truth for me may be different from you because you are sitting in a different place. And similarly, ethics is a very changing situation, a contextual situation. Ethics 200 years back would be very different from ethics today. And so for me, when we do this, we need probably define a common definition of what all these words mean actually, because we keep on using them very nicely to project somebody in good light or bad light, or some situation in good light or bad light. The way I also look at is the multilateralism and also civil society organizations. The question I would also like to ask is, of course, the companies feel as much, because companies are made of humans, and they feel as much anger as they feel as individuals about the corruption or the lack of integrity, so to say. And that's why I have no doubt in my mind that the corporates, and we have seen that in India, that last few days, especially last week, we had a huge issue of oxygen lack of availability. And many people closed down their businesses just to produce oxygen to be given out to the society, which was kind of unheard of. And even 15 days before or a month before, there were a lot of civil society organizations blaming those same organizations for something else. And so for me, somewhere I would also like to show the mirror to the civil society organizations about whether they are ethical or not, whether they have also got integrity or not, and how do you measure their integrity in addition to measuring the integrity of the corporates or the government sector. So somewhere in the line, all of us will have to carry small little mirror so that we can see our own faults in the morning every day.
So, Adelia, what do you think? Is there a lack of ethical or integrity amongst civil society organizations that needs measuring? I think you're muted, Delia.
It is the Reggie that is muting and unmuting me. So I cannot control that. Sorry. But what I would say is there is no absolutely clean sector, and we are not free from corruption or free from lack of integrity. We are not saying that, but I am rather worried about seeing each of us as the enemies. We are not fighting against companies. I'm talking about civil society. We are fighting with companies against corruption. And Transparency International is working both with governments and business all over the world in order to have an integrity level playing field and respectful of human rights and integrity. And I don't think it's so difficult to understand what is integrity. I would go to Jovi's first statement when she says doing the right thing. The problem in many societies is that the consensus on what is right and what is wrong has been broken. And we have to rebuild that consensus. What is right and what is wrong? And in many cases, what we are seeing is governments having the narrative of anti-corruption and transparency and integrity, but not the agenda. And the same goes with some friends of governments that operate in that setting or that context. This is not a moment for just throwing accusations. We are working seriously, and many civil society organizations in the world are working seriously. And if a company, for instance, has committed a fraud or has been involved in a conflict of interest and corruption situation, we will say that. And when that company is doing something right, we will say that also. That's the way in which we have to work.
Right, thank you. Pablo, just looking at companies that you're aware of, is it a lack of capacity, do you think, that is meaning that there's a will, but there's not really a way to successfully combat corruption or to have a more ethical way of doing the right thing?
From the private sector, we see corruption as unfair competition. So what we try to do from the private sector is try to be more competitive and to compete in the same basis. So that's why we promote ethics and we promote compliance programs. But as Olajobi mentioned, we have to create, an entire system, because we need the laws, we need, criminal codes, we need compliance programs, we need controllers, as Jorge is doing his job in Chile, right? We need the civil society, as Delia, we have to put everyone's eyes over public funds and private funds. Why? Because we don't want unfair competition. That's from the point of view of enterprises and companies. But also, what we want to share with society is our values. Every company, every institution has values, right? So the best way to share our values is through these compliance programs, promoting ethics. That's why we consider really important to have, this work together with different stakeholders in society. So from the point of view of enterprises and companies, ethics is a good business. Ethics provide us the way to compete in better conditions and, of course, to preserve the goodwill of the companies and the good name of the companies. But besides that, besides goodwill, we in the organizations, the key issue to promote ethics is how the CEOs and the management teams of the companies have solid values and, of course, conviction that we are convinced that ethics has to be the right way. So we have to work every day with our teams, in our companies, in our organizations, to promote these values within the organizations.
And Klaus, what sort of barriers or obstacles are you faced with in a company trying to make sure that those values are really experienced and felt by every member of the organization?
Look, first of all, I believe there's one important word next to trust, which is important, which defines our interactions in a company and also the stakeholder. That's about respect, right? Respect for the other. And you know, it's easy to criticize inside a company or outside a company or the governments. I can tell you, as someone who's sitting at the management team of a company, I feel the burden. And I can only imagine how big the burden is on governments in a country with limited possibilities to keep the country going. And I think we need to respect in this situation to each other. We owe respect inside the company, outside the company. Inside a company, many things are possible. In an organization, many things are possible. And as horrible the pandemic is, it's also an opportunity to connect easier. I'll give you a practical example. We launched our new code of ethics in the middle of the pandemic, totally virtual. We did it by a co-creation model involving 10,000 of our associates in writing and discussing the code of ethics. This would have been never possible before the pandemic. Having the digital tool, user towns, virtual conferences, feedback rounds, we could roughly involve 50,000 associates in creating a new code of ethics, using our decision-making platforms. And that's only one example, many companies and many public organizations doing similar things. And that's something to bring the barriers down, right? And we also should embrace this going forward with respect.
Thank you so much. Jorge, Klaus has just said he can only imagine the burden of trying to build back and come out of the pandemic and keep control over corruption. What is it that you would need for Chile in order to be able to do your job even more effectively?
It's very hard to say because you think always you are doing the right thing and you are doing a great job. So, but of course you have to have a self-criticism about your work and the way you are performing your tasks. But I think from our point of view, we have to realize that corruption is a kind of virus. In these times is very, I think it's a good example, which is changing with the time and with the places where we are facing this virus. So I agree with Ashish, where as he said that maybe the concept of corruption is different in some countries than in others. But I think if we agree with Delia that if you do the right thing, if you have these core values like based on human rights, you can handle the fight against corruption in a better way. From our point of view, we see corruption in 3 levels. So, and I think we have to focus our work in keeping in mind these 3 levels. And these 3 levels are, the first level maybe is the more ordinary way to find corruption, which is bribery. So, and if you look here in the environment here in Chile, maybe you can find not too many cases related with bribery. But the second level is more sophisticated, more complex, which is maybe in one word, or 2 words, is conflict of interest, which is very, very hard to find. It is very, very hard to find in a little society with a very, very close elite here in Chile, the relations, the links between companies and leaders in the public sector, between private sector and big companies and who is awarding the contract and so on. So if from the Contraloría, from our institution, we have to keep in mind that maybe one of the biggest corruption problems is this conflict of interest. But there is also a third level, which I think is also a good example for Chile, but also maybe for the developed world, which is the way we perform our work. Work poor performed, bad work, or lack of commitment in your job, I think in some cases is also a case or is a signal of corruption. If you see, for example, public works here in Chile, and you see the quality of the work, or you see design of a kind of IT project, and you see how a big amount of money is invested in this very poor developed IT software, you see that this is maybe also a case of corruption. So maybe this is my answer from our point of view, from the point of view of the Contraloría. Thank you.
Delia, thank you. Yep.
I think you can hear me now. I would say that one thing that we all have to take into account, respectfully, as Klaus mentioned, is that integrity is not a status. Integrity is an act. And every day, every situation act that we have to fulfill. That would be our motto, our leitmotif. We have to be aware, we have to be vigilant every day in every activity, wherever we stand in society. Even individual citizens who sometimes tolerate corruption because, okay, everyone is the same, and it is not. So each of us in society has to be vigilant and active in the integrity or towards the integrity objective for society.
And that goes back to what Ashish was saying about we all need to be measuring how we're doing on the integrity scale as well. And presumably, if you're saying integrity is acting, then that's going to be measurable, Ashish. Ashish, can you hear me? I think Ashish can't hear me. You're muted, Ashish.
I lost you in last 1 minute here. Yeah, oops.
Oh.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
I lost you in last, I lost the question actually. Other things I could hear.
So we were just hearing that integrity is acting. It's not being, it's actually acting, which I think goes back to what you were saying about being able to measure your integrity scale, and that being each and everyone's responsibility coming out of the crisis, which would mean, if I'm asking you, putting integrity on the international agenda means putting it on the individual agenda, which I think I understood you also as saying.
And for me, the way we want to bring it out, there are basically the governance of the society is absolutely at the core of this problem. That how do we govern individuals, groups, families, the society, and everything put together. If you have to create that governance framework, then there is a policy situation where you can have corruption and you can have lack of integrity. Then you have large transactional related issues. For example, selling out the national assets like mines, or and so on and so forth, or procuring vaccines at very high cost, for example. So that's the kind of a very wholesale level or strategic level corruption.
Yeah.
And then third part is the corruption which is at the day-to-day transaction interaction with each other, which is what I call transactional corruption. You can delay things and try to ask for things, or you can create artificial shortage. And so if you can actually bring out transparency in policy making, in the selling or buying of large things, for the government, like what my earlier speaker also said about what's happening in their countries. And the third part, which is affecting the citizens the most, the effect of the corruption or lack of integrity actually is at the transaction level, where you want to go to the hospital and you don't get the bed. And that is where you start thinking that entire system is corrupt. But if you are able to bring that transparency, the execution transparency at every moment, every level, then that will also raise questions of ethics, of integrity, of trust, of truth, and also get you the solutions. But if we say, no, we will continue to not do automation, we'll continue to be afraid of new technologies, and we will think that by just doing post facto auditing after 5 years, we'll be able to solve the future problems, I have my doubts. And I see this every day in reality, that India has moved hugely forward in bringing out those day-to-day railway ticket reservation to vaccine reservation to getting your RT-PCR report of the COVID-19. Everything is now transparent to a level. And when there is a delay, you know that the delay is there and you are able to actually raise it. And for me, that transaction level corruption, if we can remove 90-95% of people's worries about corruption, integrity, everything goes away. That doesn't mean that the larger corruption, which is actually what is yielding people more money, and that doesn't have to be resolved. Right. What India has done is that it sells all its public assets, whether it's mines or even airwaves, through auctions now. So that's how we need to do.
Thank you very much. And I think this conversation is showing that we're talking about corruption on different levels, whether it's Jorge's 3 levels, or we're talking about the transactional and the large procurement. What I would love to hear from Joby, if you could, very briefly, is I've got this question on the tip of my tongue, like, do people always really know that they're not doing the right thing? Because what I'm hearing is this is also a very personal thing, and it's an ethical thing that goes down to really this understanding, no, this is actually not right. I'm just wondering, are people deliberately being corrupt all the time, or is there just a lack of understanding?
I think in most cases, people know. If you produce fake products, fake medicines, fake PPEs, if you steal from your country, a poor country, if you also, I mean, when money is stolen from developing countries and placed in banks outside of developing countries.
That's pretty obvious.
We have people who draft the contracts, and people know, they are aware of what they're doing, but because of greed and because people are not kind to each other, we have to be kind to each other. It's important for us, for kindness. Integrity is everyone's business, and we must be kind to each other.
Let's pick that up again in our last section in just a minute, when we're talking about what collective action can now achieve. But perhaps first of all, let's have a look at some testimonials and bring some more voices in from the network members engaged in the Alliance on integrity, on moving forward with collective action.
The corona pandemic creates a fertile ground for corruption to flourish.
The impact of corruption goes far beyond the financial damages, because it is undermining the trust and the credibility in our societies and in the political systems.
Korruption ist widerlich. Sie verhindert fairen Wettbewerb, freien Handel, Wachstum und Innovation.
Más que nunca debemos asegurar la integridad, para que las cuentas sean claras y el dinero llegue a destino. Luchar en contra de la corrupción es asegurar la vigencia de los derechos humanos.
Collective Actions sind ein sehr wirkungsvolles Instrument der Korruptionsprävention.
As the world recovers from the coronavirus pandemic, countries need to strengthen their anti-corruption regimes by bringing their national legal frameworks in line with the United Nations Convention Against Corruption.
Los valores de la integridad, compromiso y transparencia guían siempre nuestras actuaciones en desarrollo de nuestros principios de negocio responsable.
éxito a largo plazo de una empresa radica no solo en hacer grandes negocios, sino cómo hacemos esos negocios, y esto es con integridad.
Tenemos que innovar e incorporar el análisis de datos. Solo así vamos a poder luchar contra ese mal que afecta a todas las sociedades y que va cambiando.
We understand that empowering women and their participation in decision-making process and reducing gender gap have a significant impact in fighting corruption and promoting good governance.
Compliance no es solamente cumplimiento de leyes y regulaciones, tiene que ser la brújula de todas nuestras decisiones, de la más grande a la más chica, en el día a día.
The organizations who are compliant organizations perform better and sustain longer term in their business prospects.
Luchar contra la corrupción es esforzarse en mantener esos valores que nos permiten tener una mejor convivencia social, familiar e também personal.
Vamos juntos, seguir levando as melhores práticas de combate à corrupção e fomento da integridade para as nossas empresas e nossos cidadãos.
We are all part of society. Each and every one of us can do something about it in his or her own environment.
#United for Integrity.
All right. Thank you. And I think that's a great start to our the final part of the discussion, the way forward, collective action. So we have 100% buy-in, I can hear from the group of panelists for collective action, but I think we really need to be very, very clear about what that means moving forward. So in pole position now are Jorge and Pablo. So Jorge, we've just heard that collective action is very effective and is a great tool. What is the most effective incentive? What is the most effective tool for different actors to engage?
Thank you, Natasha. Well, I think your question has two parts, incentives and tools. Both I will address from the point of view of the Chilean side, from the Chilean Contraloría. In the case of this country, we live in a society that no one trusts the public government, no one trusts the public sector, and this is very, very problematic. I think, and also I think this is one of the causes of the failure in the fight against the pandemic, because people, they don't trust what the government is recommending or ruling. We are currently going through a crisis of public trust, which is observed in the main indicators that measure the democracies today. And in this scenario, we acknowledge the call to action from supreme audit institutions. In fact, the OECD said that the supreme audit institutions play a key role in order to rebuild the trust in the public sector. And I think as Supreme Audit Institution in Chile, we have this task in order to impact positively in the public trust and also in the democracy. A clear mandate provides an incentive at the institutional level, and the Office of the Comptroller General in Chile, as an autonomous and an independent institution in charge of overseeing the responsible use of public resources, can positively impact and contribute to promote public trust. I think this is one incentive for us. Since we are also part of the public sector, we are not part of the government. We oversee the government, of course, but we are part of the public sector. We have to help to rebuild the trust, the public trust in the public sector. Corruption is a complex phenomenon, of course, and presents itself in various ways and forms, as I said before, and therefore the fight against corruption cannot stem from isolated initiatives, and then come the tools. Innovative and diverse insights are required, and collective action can provide that vision. That is the incentive we need to promote. Collective action is key to have new ideas to face the challenges that poses the fight against corruption. And the only way to build a collective action is trust and cooperation, and information is the support of this. And regarding tools, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the use of big data, as I said before, and use this big data for public control has arisen as the game changer, at least from your point of view. And I think I can show you at least two tools. First of all, the use of IT. And during the last year, we used the time of pandemic, especially home office, for 2 or 3 main things. First, because of the IT, we could move from an on-site to an off-site organization. We could perform more than 90% of our auditing plan last year, which I think was a tremendous success because of the lockdown, at least here in this country. And also we were able to give skills, IT skills especially, to our auditors through a capacity building process, through courses, in order to use different software and incorporate data analytics in the audit process. Okay. And the second tool, I finished very, very quickly, is alliances. We lead here in Chile the Anti-Corruption Alliance under the framework of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. We have an Anti-Corruption Alliance with public sector, civil society, and of course, enterprises and academia. Civil society is also part of our alliance. Alliance for Integrity is also part of our alliance, Anti-Corruption Alliance. And also we are working with the German International Cooperation, the GIZ, to strengthen the role of Supreme Audit institutions in the fight against corruption. And so we have a project together in order to take this.
All right, thanks, Jorge. And Pablo, if we can also presume that for you, collective action is on your agenda. So let's be very specific. What are realistic and concrete goals that you can achieve to bring the promotion of business integrity forward?
The collective action involves many sectors of society, right? So what we have to do is have and share the conviction that corruption produces harmful effects in the long term for the whole society. So first, from the perspective of the private sector and the companies, we have to define fair rules between competitors to which they adhere globally and individually against corruption. But what do we have to do with all their stakeholders in society? A good example is what we have put in order here in Ecuador, thanks to the German Technical Cooperation, GIZ. Ecuador Sincero program is an example of collective action. Why? Because we are involved, the government, the private sector, the civil society, academia, and of course, what's the aim of the program? The aim is to create and enable conditions to prevent corruption in accordance with international standards and initiatives. So what we do is provide support for small and medium businesses in order, who are part of the Chamber of Industries and the Federation of Industries, in order to create this conscious that ethics is a good business and we have to work for public ethics. In this process, we gather, as I mentioned before, other key stakeholders, civil society, the Global Compact, we gather the government, we gather the Controller General, and also international cooperation. And that's how we build this solid conscious of fight against corruption. And I think that's the key issue of the program. The key issue of the program is have solid concepts, share values, share principles, and of course, we can do this work right now during the pandemic using tools as technology. So that's also really effective to promote this fight against corruption and of course, ethics. So collective action is right now, in this moment, in this particular moment, a key issue in order to promote ethics and to prevent corruption.
And create those sort of trusting networks as well. That's what I'm hearing. And you echoed what Klaus also said about the ability to just engage with so many people digitally that we can get them all on board. So what I really want to get to is what's going to be different about the collective action that you will be doing after the pandemic than before. What have we learned? Klaus, what's going to be different and how can we get better?
Yeah, I think it's a big topic and colleagues know this, of course, to connect the dots. Traditionally, anti-bribery, compliance, collective action was in the corner, but we have the big topic of connecting human rights and anti-corruption. That's the big topic, connecting anti-corruption and human rights. Especially in the supply chain. And this is, I have to say this, often totally underestimated the efforts we need to apply there. Supply chains are really complex. We have human rights topics, cybersecurity issues were mentioned, labor rights, health, environment, anti-corruption. We talk about the first line suppliers. We talk about sub-suppliers, sub-sub-suppliers. What is the role of the governments? What is the role of the companies? What is the span of control? This is, for me, the big topic for our society. And I think it's now at the surface, but we need a more holistic approach towards collective action to capture this, move away from this pure technical anti-bribery to the bigger picture of connecting the dots.
And where do you see leadership in that, Delia? Who's in the driving seat?
I think that there are many people in the driving seat, many collective organizations trying to move that. And I couldn't agree more with Klaus, as I always do in this kind of meetings. We work together. We have, in this year, revalued the concept of public value, the concept of purpose, the need of purpose, the need of common good. We have come back in many discussions to this 17th century idea of the common good. And the common good nowadays is the Agenda 2030, the SDGs. There is no need to go into philosophical discussions. The common good is the Agenda 2030, all SDGs. And without collective action, without concert activity in business, civil society organizations, business, citizens individually, we will not get those SDGs as we want to get it. The pandemic has affected the agenda, the whole agenda, not only SDG 16. It has affected the whole agenda. So we have to rebuild the trust to work together in order to get that back as a priority for all humanity. And in order to do that, as Joby says, well, people really know when they are doing something which is not right. Getting the money from underdeveloped countries because of corruption and using them in the banks, or selling luxury no one to help them, and where there is no impunity. We need the consequences of corruption applied to those involved in corruption, not just to citizens in general, who are the ones suffering the consequences of corruption.
Thank you. So Ashish, if we're having this new dynamic drive for a holistic approach to integrity coming out of the pandemic, where do you see the next steps for a huge economy like India?
I think what the pandemic has done has made people aware of what is lacking. And it has also accelerated many trends which we thought would happen over 30 years, 50 years, are now happening in 1 year, 2 years. And I think that is what is going to happen across the world. Some of the trends which we have seen, like automation of courts, for example. Courts were hugely resistant to do any automation. They wanted to physically meet the lawyers and everyone, and now the pandemic has forced them. And so many trends which were looking impossible are happening. And for me, that is also going to increase the scale of things which can help in bringing the integrity, the transparency. For me, although we call it common good, I think I heard it loud and clear, but what is common is so uncommon, is not funny. What is common for 17th century Europe is actually very bad for the rest of the world. We have seen that over 17th, 18th, and 19th century, right? And today, it has come back. Yeah, and that's why today it is coming back. Not having the patent in public domain for vaccines is one such example, and so on and so forth. Why I'm telling you this is what is common good also need to be defined so that we can figure out the hypocrisy in terms of, in case there is. If it is not there, very good. But otherwise, we hide a lot of such intentions under the guise of these great words of integrity, truth, and so on and so forth. And somewhere, the rest of the world, including the developing world, the developed world, and some people with ethics in developed world also are understanding what these words are couched against or within. And that's where I think that is also, you will see people saying common good means what is common good, right? And let's define. And for me, those kind of trends are also going to happen. The other part, which is very interesting, is the traditional role of media is changing very, very rapidly. Over last 1 year, since pandemic, the traditional media has taken, in a way, slightly back seat, and the social media has allowed people to come out with their voices, and that is also going to ensure that now it's not going to be very easy pushing agendas going forward only in one direction. So those are some of the observations I have.
Thank you. Joby, I think what Ashish is also referring to, and what the pandemic has certainly revealed, is the massive inequalities in at global level. And so when we are looking to level the playing field and have a common agenda on integrity, what's that going to mean in terms of the perhaps much bigger picture of equality? I guess we're back to the SDGs. But what Ashish is saying is we actually don't necessarily share the same language when we're talking about the common good or the right thing to do.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we share the same language in that we have the UN Convention Against Corruption. It's the same language for everyone. And almost all of our countries have signed and ratified the convention. We have the SDGs. It's a common language. Government and every one of us, including civil society, we all came together. There are challenges in the world that we need to deal with. Zero hunger, to deal with poverty, to deal with corruption, So we have a common language. We have a common basis. It is now left for us to come together. And that's the power of collective action. It's a proven method of fighting corruption. And that's why also we have in June the UN Special Assembly Against Corruption, where governments are coming now to look at how far have we gone. And this is the best time now in terms of COVID for there to be action. The fighting against corruption has attained a level of visibility all over the world, but it doesn't have, it's not backed sufficiently by the action that we need. That action has to be taken together for every one of us to know that corruption is all over the world. It's not only in developing countries, it's also in developed countries. For every one of us to know that it's important for us to act with integrity. And I mean, the issue of COVID actually has shown the challenges, we have in the world. And we've talked about vaccines. I mean, somebody mentioned it. I've had my 2 vaccines here in America, in my continent. How many of people have been able to? And we have countries where they're hogging. We are told countries are hogging vaccines. Those are issues of inequality. We cannot recover together unless we cannot recover unless we recover together. It's important for us, and collective action is the way to go. And that's why the Global Compact, we are actually working on collective action bringing government and the private sector and civil society together to work collectively in terms of addressing corruption, because integrity is everyone's business. Fighting corruption is the opposite of integrity. And we must ensure that we fight corruption. And it's important, like I said before, to be kind, to be fair to each other. If you look at illicit financial flows, developing countries are bleeding. They're bleeding. And the money stashed in other countries. We need to revisit this and ensure that we all recover together. We all are fair to it. There has to be fairness. There has to be kindness towards each other.
Thank you. And I think what this discussion is also showing is that we need to understand that integrity is not just sort of a nice to have, but it's actually answering a lot of the other problems that are on the global agenda, on the SDGs. It has a value in itself and not just about doing the right thing. Jorge, very briefly, and then I'd love to see if we have any questions from the audience.
Very briefly, I think we need to move towards mainstreaming the fight against corruption. That is why I agree completely with Olajobi, of course. And for this, I think we need to tone from the top, from our leaders, political leaders, of course, and cooperate. The key of the successful of our species was cooperation, and I think we can fight against corruption only if we fight together. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So, Suzanne, you've been keeping an eye on the chat. So let us know, what sort of questions or comments do you think our panel should be dealing with?
Yeah, people are really interested in your discussions, and there's a lot of support coming to the different declarations from the panel. And there are some interesting questions. One is a very concrete question I would like to start with it's here mentioned Klaus Moosmeier, but maybe all the other representatives of the private sector can answer also. It has to do with the social engagement of companies and how they can manage donations in the pandemic period in such a complex scenario with high risks.
It's a great question. So I can give you our own example and challenges. So we did, in addition of serving our 800 million patients around the globe, we opened a 40 million COVID-19 response fund globally. And we were struggling at the beginning to find the right balance between speed and control. And we then came up with a system. We say we want to be fast, but we need good due diligence, centralized, what we donate, where we are engaging. And when we started this at the beginning of the pandemic, and we are now coming more or less to an end, it's amazing to see how we could engage communities. So it's good, but it must be controlled. And again, there comes the anti-corruption, the compliance, the risk organization in to take care of this. So it's a must, but has to be done in a controlled and safe way to the extent possible.
Let's hear also from Ashish.
Can you repeat the question, please, Susan?
How can companies deal with the donations in this situation of high risk?
In a way, in India, we have a unique law which says that 2% of a company's profits after tax have to be used for corporate social responsibility perspective. I think that is unique in the world, that no country's legislation provides and forces companies beyond a particular size to spend their money on CSR. And there are regulations relating to how to use their money, but where to use that money, and they need to also give it the details of where they have used and what kind of impact that has come in their annual report. And that has actually made this difficult for people to give it to friends and relatives because they need to report to other shareholders and also to the government and media. And that has helped quite a lot. But in COVID situation, one of the first the government rules was to include all the costs that the company spends on the COVID-related matters for the community will be also included in the CSR regulations so that the companies can spend. And it's close to $3 billion to $4 billion a year amount from corporates. And so in India's economy, that's a very large number, which is going officially and by law into the CSR activities. And some portion has already flown into the COVID-related activities. But effectively, we have a very nice, elaborate framework which the board has to approve, and then the AGM, the annual general body meeting of the company, also gets to know what is happening.
So you already have this mechanism. Yeah, you already have this mechanism in place. Pablo, do you think that there's a higher risk now of donations because everyone's, trying to get things flowing really, really quickly to deal with the pandemic?
What we did here in the private sector, and what we're still doing because the pandemic is still ongoing, is put in place a transparency program with all the donations. How? By having audits from PwC, Deloitte, and all these big audit firms that are here in Ecuador. And this program has been working really well. We have attending hospitals, doctors, medical doctors, and also we started these food banks in some chambers of industries in Ecuador, and we distribute this food in some places that were needed, and they were closed, 3 months, 4 months. So we were putting this, and all under this transparency program, and could it audit with international firms in order to have all the transparency during these programs, and we've been working really, really good.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, give us another question. Oh, sorry, Jorge.
Yeah.
Hold on, let's hear Jorge quickly. Yeah.
Sorry, I want to say something, because at least from our point of view here in this Chilean society, there is a tension between donations from the private sector, I mean the big companies especially, and a fair tax system. So if we want to go better after the pandemic, if we want to rebuild the economic net here in the country, at least, I think we have to think more in a fair tax system more than in donations or in the goodwill of companies. Maybe this is a critical point of view, but I think, at least from the Chilean point of view, this is very critical. It's a very critical issue at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Susanna, let's have another one.
Yeah, well, I have one you all will like, I guess. Here I can read it out loud. Very interesting discussion. We hear integrity beyond compliance a lot in the discussion. Would the world not survive already very nicely if all stakeholders were compliant with the rule of law? Do we really need more of integrity in times of crisis?
Oh, thanks. Come on, Delia. What do you think? Wouldn't it be good if we just did our homework?
I think that after working in anti-corruption for more than 30 years, we can say that we have in place the infrastructure. We have the laws, they can be better. We have the agencies, the Contralorías, the agencies anti-corruption in many countries. What we need now is to implement that and transform it in action. Commitments are very nice. Rules are very necessary, but just keeping the rules in the bookshelf is not enough. We have to work together and to reinforce this view that when we fight against corruption, we are fighting for human rights. We are fighting for a better future. We are fighting for values, really, not just for complying with 1 or 2 articles in a law. So that's the shift we are seeing now. That's what means integrity beyond compliance. We want more. We want to connect this fight with values, human rights, common good, SDGs, Agenda 2030.
And Klaus, just from the company point of view, when I listen to you, it sounds as if compliance is more a communication task than a rules-based task. And would you also say that rules are not enough? You have good rules, but it's much more about winning hearts?
I did a big learning on behavioral science on the last year when we built our new code of ethics, because it's all about the context, about reaching people, not only the minds, about the rules, the hearts and the souls, to help the people in extremely difficult dilemma situations to do what's right. This is a phrase which is very important for us, doing what's right, which is extremely difficult. I can tell you in my industry, we have only ethical dilemmas where we're looking from research and development to manufacturing to commercialization. It's full of dilemmas. And the rule book will help you to a certain extent in the regulated industry, but to build a reputation, to build a culture, you have to go the next steps. But it's a journey. Not a quick fix, I can tell you.
And Joby, do you think that this journey, sort of getting to compliance, getting to integrity via going beyond compliance, is the answer?
I think so, because if you look at even the Department of Justice, and I want to read, they saw that paper programs, compliance, just ticking the boxes does not work. That and they talked about building a culture in an organization that is top down. It's about culture. Compliance is about ticking the boxes, but it goes beyond that. For us to be able to address these issues, it's about management systems. It's about the tone from the top. So we need to go beyond compliance. We don't want to. We've seen it. I can just tick the boxes. In fact, a few years ago, we heard about multinational companies. When it comes to corruption, they ask their small and medium enterprises, the supply chain, you just go ahead and give bribes and all that. We pretend that we don't look at it because in their books, just mark it. But now you have to look at what your suppliers are doing. So it's not only about compliance, it goes beyond that. It is about your system, management system, it's about your integrity, it's about the culture of the organization. What culture are you, what are you talking about as a leader of an organization? You're saying something and you are doing something different. Even in some countries, this has been seen that it doesn't work like that. It has to be a culture of the organization. It goes beyond compliance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this conversation has shown that, yes, whether it's big data, whether it's IT, whether it's artificial intelligence, there is a lot that we can build on that has really been embraced over the period of the pandemic, and that can help us create more transparency. And if we have the right governance in place, we will be able to deal with the risks. But I think we've spent most of our time reminding each other of the fact that integrity is acting and creating a culture, that it's about trust, respect, and kindness, and knowing and transporting the message that you're doing the right thing. We have a common agenda. We don't need to reinvent the story. We have the SDGs. We have human rights in the same agenda as integrity, and we can use integrity also as a lever to achieve many more of the goals of the SDGs. And one thing that you've all said is we don't know exactly what we're going to have to do. We need to continue the conversation. We need to be at the table with each other. We need to be have humility, but also understand the context and be constantly in conversation about sharing purposes and discussing with each other what makes sense here and now in a sort of agile way. So before we finish our poll, there's our panel, there's a poll that I'd love our audience also to be part of. They've been listening so intently, and it's basically asking everyone, including our panelists, where do you see your contribution in the fight against corruption? There's no right or wrong here. It can be huge, it can be tiny, but it's got to be something where you are willing to act, because just talking is not enough. And as you write that in, please, in the chat, if I could ask our wonderful panelists and I was going to give you 60 seconds, but I'm now only going to give you 10 seconds. What's your contribution to really fight against corruption and, more importantly, create a culture of integrity? I'm just going to go from top to bottom as our audience also writes. Klaus.
As leaders, we need to create a space where people feel safe doing what's right. That's my commitment.
Thank you. Joby.
Yes, to lead by example, and to also fight corruption and ensuring that the less privileged, the vulnerable, their rights are respected. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashish, what's your contribution?
Basically, create more transparent framework and ensure that cost of non-compliance becomes so high that people forget about non-compliance because of automation and audit trails.
Thank you. The carrot and the stick. Jorge.
If we want to fight against corruption, we can't fight alone. We can't fight isolated. We have to build networks. We have to fight together in a community with cooperation.
Thank you. Pablo.
As Jorge mentions, promote collective action, because that's a key issue, and of course, inspire others to do the same.
Thank you. And Delia, what's your contribution?
I would say that we have to keep on working to create common space on the basis of trust and to reveal truth as the whole value of our work.
Thank you so much. And I'm very inspired listening to you, and I feel in very good hands and in a safe space for you to continue this collective action along with all the many partners that have joined us today and will be carrying on being part of this network. So a huge round of applause, everyone. We're all doing it in our individual spaces for our wonderful panel. Thank you very much. And I wonder, can we see some of what the audience said? Are we able to see that on our screens? Some of those contributions. Otherwise, we'll make sure that everyone has access to those, because it's really inspiring also seeing what others are doing and knowing you're part of that. So we've come to the last part of today's opening. So we have the Alliance for Integrity's global campaign, What Would You Do? And I think this really goes back to what we've been talking about on our panel, that it's the responsibility of each and every one of us. So let's share the experiences of this campaign in the closing ceremony that we have right now. Suzanne. We've heard in the panel discussion that identifying corruption risks and having tools to address them effectively are important factors. And at the Alliance for Integrity, you did something quite extraordinary. You set up a collective action to raise awareness on integrity. You acted. Can you explain what you did? You're muted, Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha, and thanks a lot, first of all, to our panelists. It was really a great discussion. It was an honor to have you with us, and looking very much further to continue our collaboration. And actually, many of you were part of the collective action that we put in place during the last year, and which actually has been on its highest level during the month of April. Where we had a lot of messages in the social media channels to stand up for integrity and show how people can act and get involved in the fight against corruption. And the origin of the idea was when the pandemic raised, and we thought that we have so much knowledge, so much expertise in the network, and at the same time we felt that the idea of integrity was at risk. So we talked to our network supporters and members and asked them, what if we all stand up for corruption? Because we see in this crisis that there are a lot of companies, small companies, for example, have to face very difficult situations. And we have learned from the discussion that people normally know what is right and what is wrong, but they sometimes do not know how to react when they feel that something is wrong. And we wanted to show that everybody can be in such a situation. There is no black and white. There are a lot of gray areas, and it's very important to be aware of the gray areas and learn what to identify where there is a risk, and to know, to have tools to be able to react in the right way in a specific situation. And that is why we came up with this integrity campaign. And I will talk a little bit more about it later, and we have guests also. We started with discussing what would be a typical dilemma situation for a company in times of pandemic. And that is what we shared with the community.
Let's have a look at it right now. So the dilemma situation at the heart of the campaign. What would you do?
Surely Linda's birthday party is not the right place to discuss this.
The COVID-19 pandemic has really hurt our business.
I know. If business doesn't pick up soon, we might have to lay off some of our employees. I can't even pay the mortgage anymore.
You know, Linda's company has just started a new tender process. You helped her out before, so maybe she'll return the favor.
I'm not sure about this. Our company isn't even big enough for this contract.
We could really use your help here, Linda. How about that new contract you're working on?
Well, I know the conditions for awarding the contract. If you want, I could give you the information you need to win.
What would you do? Exactly, that is the question. And later we'll be posting the link up for you in the chat, and you'll be able to, it's an interactive video, you'll be able to press the button as to what you would do. There are 3 answers. And Suzanne, particularly in the light of COVID, these are real existential problems that people are facing, which means that that decision, what do I do, becomes even harder.
Exactly. That is why we ask, what would you do? And we offer 3 options. You can see it on the platform of the campaign. Well, you always have options in life. That is one important message also. You can react and speak up against corruption. You can just do nothing about it, or you can engage in corruption. So there are options, there are tools to speak up against corruption, and we want to share with the community all the tools that the members of our network have put in place already, because there's a lot of there are a lot of possibilities to get engaged, not only in collective action, but on the company level and in the sector. And that is the message that the big number of supporters we had, and that was really an amazing experience. We were working with 60 supporters from 12 countries to create and to conceive this collective action, and to make it make an adaptation to every local context, because corruption is a global challenge, but there are very different manifestations in different cultural, social, economic contexts. And that's what we wanted to take into account. And that's why our supporters did such a great job in conceiving this global integrity campaign with all the local ingredients.
And let's see who's behind the campaign and hear a little bit why. And afterwards, we'll be chatting to 2 drivers of the campaign and find out more about their experiences and next steps.
When COVID-19 came into our lives, it was said that the virus affects every person in the same way. It makes no difference. But it soon became clear that that was a myth. As in every crisis, poor and vulnerable people are most affected. We saw cyber attacks, subsidy fraud, disruption of supply chains. But what was clear from the start was that we had to act quickly and collectively to overcome the crisis.
With our Global Integrity campaign, we want to achieve two main objectives. First of all, and this is the first step, we want to raise awareness for the need of integrity. But of course, we all know that this is not enough. We also have to take action.
I went to my team and asked, what if we invite our network members to stand up for integrity? They know how to fight corruption and then can engage others to do so. Well, that's what we did.
Our Global Integrity campaign was created by a great sounding board. We met every 2 weeks to define the general concept, starting with the key messages to the logo, the design, the slogan, and of course also the distribution strategy in the end. We were supported by a communication agency based in Germany, but it was up to our partners to define the concept. In the regional working groups, we were discussing how we can adapt the content of the global campaign to the regional background and cultural context.
One may assume that creating a global communication campaign is not part of the compliance officer's work, but at the heart of any compliance program is communication. The compliance agenda is a shared responsibility.
It is a proud moment to be a part of this Global Integrity campaign, and it is really a pleasure to get connected with the global community of the professionals and people working for compliance adherence and business integrity.
I have been delighted to work in the global campaign of Alliance for Integrity, in which we have worked to create this awareness about the importance of integrity during difficult times.
When we heard that Alliance for Integrity is working on a campaign to raise awareness, we wanted to jump in and do whatever we can. And that's why we decided that we will help Alliance for Integrity by developing their website, hosting it and promoting it.
The democratic process of the creation was very interesting, which helped us to have an active participation in each stage. Congratulations, Alliance, for united, engaging, and especially calling us to act.
I am still worried how we should pay the salaries for our employees this month.
Que la compañía de Linda ha empezado una licitación. Ella es la jefe de compras.
Ich weiß nicht, ob das so eine gute Idee ist.
A gente poderia aproveitar sua ajuda, Mari. Que tal aquele novo contrato em que você está trabalhando?
If you want, I could give you the information you need to win.
United for Integrity.
See the partners who created this campaign, this is acting, this is what we were hearing about, what collective action actually is. So we have two guests here, two drivers of the campaign, Lorenzo Berro, who's chairman and co-founder of Vesta Immobiliaria from Mexico, and Bhaktasala, co-founder of KNS Technologies in India. And Susanna's here, obviously, as the real organizer of the campaign. So first of all, let's hear a little bit more, Lorenzo, first of all, about your role in the campaign.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you, Susanna, and great to be here with you, Bhakta. I want to really thank you very much also for this opportunity to be part of the closing ceremony of the global campaign as part of the Alliance for Integrity Global Conference 2021 opening event. So this is really an honor. And also it was really an honor for Vesta to participate both in the sounding board and also in the regional group of the global campaign. And when I talk about Vesta, I should say Claudia Medina, who really make things happen representing Vesta. In the sounding board, all the attendants contributed to decide what were the best ways to impact the audiences through a campaign with different media tools, giving everyone their best. Through the second one, we collaborated to adapt the campaign to the Mexican and Andean region. In my own words, I should say this is like tropicalize the campaign and take it to the local dimension. Those were mainly the roles.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a huge force, really creating a brand actually out of integrity. Bacta, what was your role?
First of all, thank you so much. And if I start naming people, I'm sure I'm going to forget some. So thank you all. Initially, we were thinking that we will just participate in digital marketing, but then once we started interacting, we realized that there is a little bit more than what we initially thought of. So that's when we started pitching in about designing and developing the website apart from the digital campaign. So we volunteered when we came to know that you are working on creating a website, which is kind of a little bit tricky because it has to work based on different region. It has to support multiple languages, and it has to be dynamic also based on from where you want to log in. So your regional language should appear as the default one. So we took it as a challenge, and we thought that we can do this and we can help Alliance for Integrity in this way.
So we were talking on the panel just now about the need to really make sure we understand the same thing when we're talking about integrity and trust and the cultural aspects that are part of that. How did you work together, Bacta, on that global scale to really make sure that you were speaking the same language?
It was tough, but the team was very well organized, and I mean, thanks to the team, they did a very meticulous planning. We had to do a lot of iterations, but still we were able to achieve quite a bit, mostly because I think the team from Alliance for Integrity did a wonderful job. So we have to realize that it's not just one region, one language, one culture. It's spread into, I think it was supporting what, some 12 languages or 12 regions or something like that, and with the different time zones. The credit should go to Alliance for Integrity. They did a wonderful job.
Thank you. And maybe, you know, the fact that we've all gone digital, even when we're talking to someone down the road, means that global collaboration becomes a little bit easier in itself as well. Lorenzo, what did you particularly enjoy most about working in the campaign, in this global team?
Okay, well, definitely what we enjoyed the most was collaboration. And at the campaign, how collaboration could improve any efforts being able to work with excellent professionals. It surprised us the enthusiasm that everyone and the commitment for excellence. I should say that it was fun. It was fun. And when we talk about collaboration, I probably should say that we were deeply involved in the regional scale. We adapted this. We were able to help to adapt the script of the regional video as a whole, and then we received feedback and adapted the script according to it. Then, through the help of Alliance for Integrity and the Consejo de la Comunicación, we were able to hire the editor of the video, a professional, active, and skilled Mexican illustrator who perfectly grasped our needs. We took photos of the collaborators that played the role of actors in the video, together with photos from collaborators with Movistar Colombia, and hired the voice of professionals to complete the adaptation of the video. The editor included the subtitles that were provided by Frontera Energy from Ecuador, and our contents coordinator edited the testimonials from the region, aside from producing our own Vesta testimonials. I should say that this is, for me, teamwork total.
I can imagine there's a lot of learning there as well about, you know, how to perhaps also translate what we're talking about into different languages, not just different languages like Spanish, English, but also across cultures. So what was particularly important for you? You're both businessmen and you're joining the fight against corruption. Bacta, what is particularly important for you in terms of impact of this campaign?
Okay, I think that the fact that this raises the awareness and communicate during difficult times, this is how important integrity is always important. This is why integrity is always important. I think that especially within these pandemic times, all the difficulties that all the world we're facing as a globe, and then being able to raise this awareness and take action collectively.
Right. So this basically putting it out there and making it very, very difficult to hide. Back to what was the impact that you wanted to achieve, or you still want to achieve also with your involvement?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. See, one of the things that we realized in this campaign is the first thing is creating the awareness, which is what I believe this campaign is all about. And I think it did a wonderful job. Well, you were discussing before that there are many options in front of us. We don't know what is right. There is no, we cannot clearly define that this is correct and that is wrong. There are so many things that we need to consider. I would say that we are not professionals. We are not into those kinds of things. But in this campaign, what we learned is that even small decisions that might impact we may think that it is a small thing, like giving out in your video example is just giving out simple information about the contract. But some of us don't realize that it is actually kind of corruption, that we are helping someone and putting others in disadvantage. So these are the things that if we make people aware of this, probably it will help in reducing a lot of corruption.
Right, and as we also heard in the panel discussion, corruption is taking place at such different levels that you know, it's not just bribery, it's not just big procurement projects, it's every day. And we also heard in the panel that people who work in companies are people. So it's also this moral dilemma that each and every person also has to look at. Just to conclude, what's your main integrity message to people all over the world as they rebuild their communities after the pandemic, in order for them to rebuild their communities and make sure that integrity is at the heart of that rebuilding? What's your main message? Perhaps, Susanna, I could start with you. What's your main message for people all over the world rebuilding?
Well, I said it before. We all can do something about fighting corruption, and we are all responsible for doing so. We have the choice, and there are a lot of offers and possibilities around. Take them and act collectively.
Lorenzo, what's your main message to people all over the world?
Oh, thank you for your question, Natasha. I believe that integrity must be part of the DNA of every person, of every company. And from that standpoint, we can communicate that and communities can be rebuilt. Efforts to elevate integrity, I believe, must be a daily effort. For me, integrity equals freedom. And integrity should be the guiding force for freedom.
Thank you. Back to your message as we rebuild our societies.
Exactly. This is a very hard time, and it's very tempting to not consider integrity at this stage, because we might see that a lot of people are suffering. So we might think that we are actually helping. But in reality, what we are really doing is we are hurting them, because integrity to me is building a long-term value, but corruption is sacrificing that. For a very short-term gain, we are sacrificing a very long-term benefit for the greater good. So I think my message would be that we need to be a lot stricter. We need to think about our decisions multiple times before we take one.
Thank you. And just this little exercise seems simple enough, doesn't it? The moral dilemma of the little film, but it's really, really hard. So thank you so much for giving us the confidence that I hope you will have when you play the game and make your choice as to what you would do, that you have the confidence to do the right thing. So thank you so much to you and all the other partners who are behind this campaign. It will stay online, so you can please go and join it and tell everyone else too, because everyone needs to be confronted with these options till the end of April. Wonderful. Susanna, you're going to close the campaign now. What would you do? So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha, and thank you to Lorenzo and Bacta. It's great to have you here with us, and thank you for sharing your enthusiasm. You really did a great job and a very important task in the integrity campaign. I would really like to say thank you to all of those who supported us, starting with the members of the sounding board, the members of the regional working groups, also the team of the Alliance for Integrity with the leadership of Elena Ritkas, and the agency in Berlin, SEBUM. Really, it was a collective action at its best, I would say. We, of course, do not know so far what are the numbers that we have achieved with this campaign. We will share this with you once it is really finished. Now we close the messages that we spread through our supporters in the social media, via Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and yeah, and now you still have the opportunity to go to the platform, look at the tools and the information that is shared by our supporters. Please make use of it. And to all those who have been engaged, I really look forward to keeping the spirit and learn from this experience, replicate it if possible, and innovate and do new things in the future. So once again, thank you to all of you.
Wonderful. And exactly. Thanks, Lorenzo. Round of applause to all those involved. Fantastic. And we're just about to wrap up and come to an end of today's opening for the 3-day conference. Day 2 will be starting tomorrow at 12 noon. But before you go, why don't you just stay and hang out in the app a little bit more? I'm going to give you a very brief overview, and the camera will be following me around the app as I introduce you some of the main features. So the agenda, this is where you can get the orientation. So if you go on tomorrow, you'll be able to see all the events of tomorrow. You can click, for example, on the first event. You can see the speakers, the content, and you can see how to join the event right at the bottom. On the right-hand side, and many of you have already used it, you can see the chat where you can write your comments, see further information, which will be posted. So anything that you need to read will be there. There are polls before and during the event, and thank you also for contributing to those, and the wall of ideas. The wall of ideas gives us the opportunity to have a much more in-depth qualitative discussion where you can share your comments, ideas, best practices with the other participants. So please use that. You can click on a post comments, ideas, and you can upload pictures there as well. It's a great format for exchanging knowledge. Let's go back to the event. You can save the event in your schedule and also set a reminder, which is being shown to you right now. You can download the event with an iCal and save it in your Outlook. Let's go back to the home screen again, where we can see the Twitter wall. So please do join us on Twitter, #UnitedForIntegrity, and you'll be able to see the traffic that's going on there. On the home screen, you can also see the media partner. Oh, there's a lot of Twitter I've just seen. You can see the media partner, who are really important for the Alliance for Integrity's 4th Global Conference. As we've seen, this is a communicative effort that we also need to make to change culture. And the media partners are from the private sector and civil society, and they're sharing and supporting of the Global Conference. Please do support them on your social media accounts around the globe. We have a topic page on the home screen as well, where the content we're talking about at the conference is to be found, and you can learn more about all the topics of our events. For example, digitalization, where there's further information, a video publication of what the Alliance for Integrity offers for each topic. And you can go directly to the event on this topic as well. Otherwise, on the home screen, there's the playlist. You can see there's no end of gimmicks here. It's an innovative tool for the conference playlist. So please leave your songs. There are trainers, partners, and speakers who've shared their songs with us, those songs that inspire them to work on integrity and anti-corruption. So we can hear that really loudly in the comfort of our own houses. And there's a quiz as well. So an integrity quiz where you can answer specific questions and win a surprise prize at the end. Otherwise, last but certainly not least, all the stuff that we usually do when we're at conferences, going and shaking hands and having a coffee or a beer together, matchmaking. You can find people in the matchmaking who are interested in the same topic that you're interested in. Go to the tag distribution and click on a specific topic and see all people who are interested in this topic. All right, and that's it. That's our wonderful app. So I wish you 2 further excellent days of discussion. Be safe, be collective, and I think we've all learned today as well, be kind. Thank you.